Before we do the deep dive in what this scripture means, I want to offer a hypothetical. And it stars you. So I want you to imagine you are 13 years old. 13 years old, and you know in 3 short years you are going to be the owner of your very own driver's license. And it is exciting. Imagine the freedom. But you also know the way things are right now with your family, you might not be able to afford a driver's license, or you might not be able to afford a car even. And you know things aren't looking great. In 3 years, it'll probably be the same. At least your parents have told you as much. But you take the initiative. You decide, if my parents can't do it for me, I'm going to do it myself. So you walk yourself over to the used car lot, and you ask for the manager. And you say to the manager, how much do I need to save up to get a reliable used car? The manager thinks about it and looks at you and says, tell you what, $1,500 will buy you a reliable used car. $1,500, great. We have a good round number. We know how much that we need to save up for this car. So over the next 3 years, you put the pedal to the metal. You start mowing lawns. You start watching babies. You go to your uncle's farm and you start picking corn for pennies on the dollar, saving every cent for this car. You have given up your weekends, your evenings, your summers. You've given up music and sports because you have your eye on the prize and you want that car. Today's your 16th birthday. Happy birthday. And today's the day you're going to buy your car. You wake up early, you open your top drawer, and you pull out $1,500, even a big wad of cash. And you walk yourself triumphantly over to the car dealership. And as you walk in, someone walks in behind you. A young man your age, probably 16 as well. You recognize him from school, but you don't know him real well. You go to the counter and you ask for the manager. And he comes out. And you say, sir, I have the $1,500 right here. And he remembers that deal. And so he says, okay. And he pulls out a set of keys. I've got your car right here. And you exchange it. And you grab those keys and it feels good. I did it. I got my car. But then the manager asks you to step aside. There's another customer, the young man who came in after you. The young man looks at the manager and says, here's the deal. I just turned 16 today. And I'm looking to get a car. How much is it going to cost me to get a good, used, reliable car? And the manager looks him up and down, says, how much you got? The kid says, I have $15. You're thinking to yourself, you're a few $100s short there, pal, and 3 years too late. But the manager says, it's a deal, and hands him a set of keys and takes his $15. Now, how do you feel about the keys in your hand now? You probably don't feel great about the deal that you just got, that you saved up for 3 years. So you shove the young man out of the way, and you look at this manager and say, are you kidding me? I labored for 3 years. I gave up everything, my summers, my weekends, my evenings, sports, music. I don't have any friends. I've been working this whole time for $1,500 to get this car, and you're just giving it to this kid? And the manager, he takes a step back and says, hey man, you got what you wanted. We had a deal. $1,500 for one used car. Did you not get your car? No, I got my car. It just feels unfair. How about you stop being so jealous? You take your car and you go. Get out of my shop. So you go to your car and you unlock it. And you sit inside of it. And you imagine for 3 years what it would feel like to sit inside of your car. But it's not as comfortable as you imagined. So you turn over the engine and you listen to that kitty purr, but feels kind of sick, to be honest. So you pull out of the parking lot and you roll down the window and you feel the wind in your hair, but man, you're still angry about what happened in that shop. What kind of nonsense is that? This is the story Jesus is telling this morning. He's telling us about that feeling that we all get when someone gets a better deal. When our investment and our work and our labor is cheapened by someone else who got lucky. And our story opens with Jesus telling this parable. And he says, imagine that the kingdom of God is like a guy who owns some land. He's like a landowner, right? And what happens is this landowner goes down to the market to hire some servants to work in his vineyard. Right off the bat, we know something is weird about this story for two reasons. One, this guy owns a vineyard. In first century Israel, if you owned a vineyard, you were rolling in it. This wasn't wheat. This wasn't a survival crop. This was a crop that you sold to the rich people who had money to pay you a surplus. So he was rich, and he's going to the market himself to hire people. This is like if Elon Musk went to the unemployment agency to get mechanics. This just didn't happen. It's just strange. And so the audience hearing this story knows there's something weird going on right away. This isn't just any normal landowner. He's at least eccentric, and at worst, he's a psychopath, right? But he goes and he finds these day laborers. And he tells them, here's my deal. I will give you 1 denarius, that's 1 day's average wage, to work on my vineyard. The denarius was the standard. It was the minimum wage. It was enough to give you a meal for the day, or enough to give you a warm bed at night, but probably not both. What it was absolutely enough for was to keep you coming back every day. And that's how the system operated. It kept people just healthy enough, just alive enough, to make sure that they were a constant source of cheap labor. And so it should be no surprise to you that these day laborers were the lowest of the low on the poverty scale. They were susceptible to things like starvation, to things like disease, to things like dying from the elements all alone. That was their reality. During this time, even slaves and indentured servants had it better than these guys, because at least someone had an investment in them. So they were extraordinarily desperate, hoping, praying, wishing that someone would come along and hire them so they could get their denarius. And lucky day, someone comes along and offers them that denarius for their day's labor. Great. So they go off to the vineyard. And so does the landowner. Except he comes back to the market again, which is also odd. He did it first time, then a second time, then a third time, and a fourth time throughout the day. By the time that he hires the last laborers, it's already at the end of the day. The workday is ending. But he hires them anyway and says, I'm going to pay you what is right for you to work at my vineyard. And so they're like, all right, low expectations. You know, it's only like an hour or two of work, but we'll do it, sure. So they work. And all these laborers work all day. And the landowner tells his manager, go get them and bring them to me and arrange them from the people who were hired the most recently to the people who were hired at the beginning of the day. Okay, boss. So they do this. They arrange them that way. And what this man says, this landowner says to the first people, the people in the front of the line who were hired most recently, thank you for your work. Here is 1 denarius. A single day's wage for 1 hour of work. The people at the back of the line are thinking, oh, snap, this guy's got money. If they only worked 1 hour and we worked 12 hours, well, I don't know what the math on that is, but that's a lot more denariuses than what we were promised in the first place, right? So they're getting excited. And then the next group moves up. Thank you for your work today. Here is 1 denarius. Well, that's not a good sign. 1 denarius for them too. They worked like 3 hours. The next group moves up. Thank you for your work, 1 denarius. And so on and so forth until the first people who are hired get there. Now, they've been thinking about this denarius all day. From the moment they woke up to now, they've been thinking about getting their money, getting their meal, getting their bed, getting what they deserve for their work. They longed for that feeling of holding that 1 coin in their hand and happily going off to a restaurant or someplace they could get something. The landowner says, thank you for your work. Here is 1 denarius. It doesn't feel so good in the hand anymore. It doesn't slap like he thought it would. Now it's just a cold coin, and they are upset. And they tell the guy, what is this? You gave these guys, who barely worked an hour, a denarius? You're giving us, who worked 12 hours, 1 denarius? What kind of game is this? So the landowner says, hey man, we had a deal, didn't we? 1 day of labor, 1 denarius. That's what I gave you. That's what I got. Why don't you stop being so jealous and leave? And then Jesus ends the story by saying, so yeah, that's how it works. The last shall be first and the first shall be last. End of story. And we're left to chew on that and to think about that. What does that mean? What does that mean for us? Obviously, from my first example, we know this kind of feeling, this reaction to unfairness and injustice, that's not just a first century disciples feeling. That's not just a Roman Empire feeling. That is a human feeling. So often, people like to define their achievements by the losses of others. We like to define our wealth by how poor other people have been. We like to revel about all the things we've done with our life and all the things that we've become because we know some people haven't. Either they didn't work hard enough, or they didn't show up on time, or they didn't have the gumption that we did to wake up at the beginning. And so we're upset when we see steaks on a conveyor belt at the grocery store and someone paying with an EBT card. Or we get upset when we see someone in public housing who hasn't earned that house like I earned my house. And we feel like our home ownership is cheapened by them getting to live somewhere. We feel angry that someone gets medical care that they desperately need when they didn't have to get a job that got medical care. I went to college. That's how I got my medical care. Maybe you should go to college. And we like to make these assumptions. We like to assume that people just didn't show up, didn't work hard enough, didn't do what they were supposed to do to be successful, and therefore they should die. And that's what the disciples would have thought, because that's what their society told them. And that might be what you thought about the car. That person shouldn't get a car. He should have shown up when he was 13 to save up if he didn't have money. He shouldn't have one. And instead of enjoying these little things in life, instead of enjoying who we've become for the sake of what we are, we become embittered and angry that other people get to have the things that we have anyway, like it was all for nothing. But that's the thing about justice and fairness. We like to define justice and fairness by the terms that we're used to, by our Western sensibilities and our American terms. It's fair when you get what you've earned. It's just when you get what you've put in the time and the hours and the labor for. Anything else is injustice. But that is not what Christianity is. And Jesus demonstrates that in this parable. The last shall be first, regardless of when they woke up, regardless of how much work they've done. They deserve to be fed. They deserve to have a place to put their head down. It's a hard thing to swallow. It's not easy to consider that we should raise the poor up. But in the Old Testament, justice is a recurring theme, and this is what Jesus is referring to. The word is mishpat. That doesn't mean you get what you deserve. It's a justice that is uplifting. A justice that pulls up, not pushes down. A justice that praises, not punishes. A justice that heals and doesn't injure. I like to imagine how different would our stories be if these people understood justice the way Jesus understands justice. Perhaps the day laborers who got paid just their 1 denarius would be glad not because they got what they were expecting and what they worked for, but because their neighbor and their fellow man and their fellow laborer got a break today. Maybe if it were us, 16 years old, in our new car with the top down, instead of grumbling and being upset, we could look out onto the road and wave at our fellow motorist, our friend from school, because he gets a car too, and he got to keep his childhood. Maybe we can be glad twice instead of not glad at all.